Pregnant wife in pain. Husband with mistress. She loses hope and asks for a divorce. Years later The November morning crept through the windows of their Charleston townhouse, casting long shadows across Marlo Jennings' bathroom floor. Her hands trembled as she stared at the pregnancy test, the two pink lines as clear as the frost forming on the window pane. At 28, she had always prided herself on having life figured out, but now her heart raced with equal parts hope and dread. She caught her reflection in the mirror, sea-green eyes rimmed with uncertainty, shoulder-length auburn hair still tousled from sleep. The designer blazer hanging on the door seemed to mock her perfectly curated life, a life that had been slowly unraveling for months despite her desperate attempts to hold everything together. The familiar scent of vanilla-iced coffee wafted up from the kitchen, where the coffee maker hummed its morning song. It was a comfort ritual she'd developed over the past few months, as Sterling's late nights at the law firm became more frequent. Her husband of 3 years, Sterling James Archer, with his perfectly coiffed blonde hair and tailored suits, had become a stranger in their own home. Maybe this changes everything, Marlo whispered to herself, unconsciously biting her lower lip, a nervous habit she'd never managed to break. Her fingers found a loose receipt on the counter, and she began doodling abstract patterns on its edges, another anxiety tell she'd carried since childhood. The house felt different today. The high ceilings and modern furniture that had once felt like achievements now seemed to echo with emptiness. She pulled her favorite skinny jeans from the drawer, paired them with a cream silk blouse and her trusted ankle boots, armor for the day ahead. As she spritzed on her daisy perfume, Marlo's phone buzzed with a message from Sterling. Late meeting tonight. Don't wait up. Her stomach clenched. Lately, his messages had been getting shorter, more distant. The warning bells in her mind grew louder, but she pushed them away. Instead, she focused on planning the perfect dinner to share her news. She'd make his favorite, a recipe she'd learned from his mother, Victoria Archer, during one of her attempts to win over the formidable Boston socialite. Throughout the day at her graphic design firm, Marlo's mind wandered to the future. She sketched nursery designs between client projects, imagining soft yellows and greens, gender-neutral and perfect. Her coworkers noticed her distraction but attributed it to the upcoming holiday season. Evening arrived with a bitter wind. Marlo had set the table with their wedding china, sterling silver gleaming under the dimmed lights. The scent of roasted herbs filled the air, mixing with the lingering aroma of her baking apple pie, Sterling's favorite dessert. At 9:47 p.m., the front door finally opened. Sterling's 6'2" frame cast a long shadow in the entryway. His gray-blue eyes looked tired, his usually impeccable suit slightly rumpled. The familiar notes of Bleu de Chanel surrounded him, but there was something else, a sweeter, unfamiliar scent that made Marlo's heart skip a beat. You waited up, he said, his voice carrying none of the warmth it once held. I told you not to. I made dinner, Marlo replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. I have something to tell you. Sterling loosened his tie, his wedding ring catching the light. Can it wait? I'm exhausted, and I have an early meeting tomorrow. Marlo's hand instinctively moved to her still flat stomach. The pregnancy test seemed to burn in her pocket where she'd kept it all day, waiting for this moment. But looking at her husband now, at the distance in his eyes and the way he couldn't quite meet her gaze, the words stuck in her throat. Of course, she heard herself say, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. It can wait. As Sterling disappeared upstairs without touching the meal she'd prepared, Marlo stood in their kitchen, surrounded by cooling food and unspoken truths. The November wind howled outside, rattling the windows, as if nature itself was trying to warn her of the storm to come. 3 days after the cold dinner that grew cold, Marlo sat in her home office, surrounded by the soft glow of her computer screen. The nausea that had become her morning companion lingered well into the afternoon. She rubbed her temples, trying to focus on the branding project due next week, when a notification popped up on her screen. Sterling had forgotten to log out of their shared cloud account. Her cursor hovered over the notification. She'd never been the type to snoop, priding herself on the trust they'd built. But something, perhaps the same instinct that made her keep the pregnancy test hidden in her drawer, urged her to click. What she found made her blood run cold. Hotel receipts, late-night dinner reservations for 2 at places she'd never been, and messages, hundreds of them, to someone named Reese, the most recent from just an hour ago. Missing you already. Can't wait for tonight. Marlowe's hands shook as she scrolled through the evidence of her husband's other life. The texts painted a picture of a months-long affair, filled with inside jokes and intimate moments that felt like daggers to her heart. But it was a photo that finally broke her. Sterling and a striking brunette, their faces close, her hand on his chest. The timestamp showed last Friday, when he'd claimed to be at a client dinner. The woman was beautiful in an effortless way, with long dark hair and a free spirit that radiated even through the digital image. Reese Moreland, according to her linked social media profile, marketing consultant, 25. Everything Marlowe wasn't. Breathe, she whispered to herself, one hand instinctively moving to her stomach. The room seemed to spin, the carefully curated art prints on her walls, her own designs, blurring into meaningless shapes. Her phone buzzed. Eleanor, her mother. "Sweetie, you missed our lunch date. Everything okay?" Marlowe tried to respond, but a sob escaped instead. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Eleanor said, no questions asked. While waiting for her mother, Marlowe printed everything. Each page felt heavier than the last. Reservations, messages, photos, a paper trail of betrayal. She organized them methodically, the designer in her needing order even in chaos. Eleanor arrived like a warm breeze in a storm, her presence filling the house with strength Marlowe desperately needed. At 55, Eleanor Jennings carried herself with the grace of someone who'd weathered her own storms and emerged stronger. "Oh, honey," she said, taking in Marlowe's tear-stained face and the scattered papers. She wrapped her daughter in an embrace that smelled of home and safety. "I'm pregnant," Marlowe whispered into her mother's shoulder. Eleanor stiffened for a moment, then held her daughter tighter. "Start from the beginning." As Marlowe recounted everything, the test, the dinner, the discoveries, Eleanor listened, her face growing stormy. When Marlowe finished, Eleanor picked up one of the photos, studying it with narrow eyes. "That bastard," she muttered, then caught herself. "Sorry, sweetheart, but he doesn't deserve you, or this baby." "What do I do, Mom?" Marlowe's voice cracked. "I had everything planned. The nursery, the announcement at Christmas. Plans change. You're stronger than you know, Marlowe Elise, and you're not alone." A key turned in the front door. Sterling, home early for once. Eleanor squeezed Marlowe's hand. "Want me to stay?" Marlowe straightened her spine, wiping her eyes. "No, I need to do this myself." Sterling walked into the office, stopping short at the scene before him. His eyes darted from Eleanor to the papers on the desk, and his face drained of color. "Marlowe," he started, but she cut him off. "How long?" Her voice was steady, surprising even herself. "I should go," Eleanor said, but before leaving, she fixed Sterling with a look that could freeze hell. "I raised my daughter to know her worth. Remember that." After Eleanor left, silence filled the room like smoke. Sterling loosened his tie, always his tell when nervous. It's not what you think," he began. "Don't." Marlowe's voice was ice. "Don't insult me with lies. I've seen everything." She stood, gathering the papers into a neat stack. "I'm pregnant, by the way. Found out 3 days ago. Was going to tell you over that dinner you skipped." She watched the color drain further from his face. "But I guess you were busy with Reese." Sterling stumbled back as if physically struck. "Pregnant. But we can fix this, Marlowe. It was a mistake. Reese was... A mistake implies once. This..." She gestured to the stack of evidence. "This was a choice. Multiple choices. Sterling, every dinner, every hotel, every lie." The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows across the room. Marlowe thought about how many sunsets she'd watched alone while Sterling was with her. The rage and hurt crystallized into something harder. Resolve. "I'll be staying with my parents tonight," she said, her voice unnaturally calm. "I suggest you use the time to think about what you want, because right now, you're about to lose everything." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of morning sickness and sleepless nights at her parents' colonial-style home in Charleston's historic district. Marlowe spent her days working remotely, throwing herself into design projects while ignoring Sterling's increasingly desperate texts. Her father, Caleb, had taken to brewing her special ginger tea every morning, his pragmatic nature showing love through action rather than words. That Wednesday morning started like any other until the cramping began. At first, Marlowe dismissed it as normal pregnancy discomfort, but when she noticed the spots of blood, panic seized her chest. "Dad!" she called out, her voice trembling. Caleb appeared in the doorway, took one look at his daughter's pale face, and grabbed his car keys. "I'll call your mother. She'll meet us at the hospital." The emergency room's fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over everything. Marlo lay on the examination table, her mother holding one hand while Dr. Andrea Martinez performed an ultrasound. The silence in the room was deafening. "There's still a heartbeat, Doctor," Martinez finally said, "but you're experiencing some complications. The stress you're under, it's affecting the pregnancy. You need complete bed rest for at least 2 weeks." Eleanor's grip tightened. "She'll do whatever's necessary." Just then, Sterling burst through the door, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. "I came as soon as I got Caleb's message. Is everything—" "Get out." Marlo's voice was quiet but firm. "Marlo, please. That's my child too." "Your child?" Eleanor stood, her presence filling the small room. "Where were you when she needed you? When you were busy destroying your family?" Dr. Martinez cleared her throat. "Mr. Archer, I must ask you to leave. Any additional stress could seriously compromise the pregnancy." Sterling hesitated, his gray-blue eyes meeting Marlo's. For a moment, she saw a flicker of the man she'd married, concerned, loving, present. But then she remembered the photos, the texts, the lies, and turned away. Later that evening, tucked into her childhood bed, Marlo scrolled through her work emails when a message from an unknown sender caught her eye. Subject line, "You should know." Inside was a single photo, Sterling and Reese outside a jewelry store, his hand on the small of her back. The timestamp was from yesterday. Below the photo was a message, "He's planning to leave you. I thought you deserved to know." A friend at his firm. The room spun. Marlo clutched her stomach, remembering Dr. Martinez's warnings about stress. A soft knock at her door preceded her father's entrance. "Princess," Caleb said, using her childhood nickname. "I've been thinking. Remember that brownstone I bought in Brooklyn last year as an investment? It's empty right now. Could use a tenant who knows design. Maybe someone looking for a fresh start." Marlo looked at her father, his kind eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair, the way he always knew exactly what she needed without her having to ask. "New York," she whispered, tasting the possibility. "But my job, the divorce. Your boss already agreed to let you work remotely, permanently." I called her. Eleanor appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. "And as for the divorce," she held up her phone, showing a contact page. "Remember my college roommate? She's now one of the top divorce attorneys in New York. We've watched you dim your light for him these past few years," Caleb said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Maybe it's time to shine on your own terms." Marlo's hand drifted to her stomach, thinking of the tiny life depending on her decisions. New York meant starting over, facing the unknown, being truly alone for the first time in her adult life. But staying in Charleston meant watching her marriage crumble in slow motion, seeing Sterling and Reese build their life together, facing pitying looks at every familiar corner. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Sterling. "We need to talk. About everything. Please." She deleted it without reading further. "Okay," she said, looking at her parents. New York, but not running away. Running toward something new. Eleanor smiled, tears in her eyes. "That's my girl." That night, as Charleston's autumn wind rustled through the oak trees outside, Marlo opened her laptop and began researching Brooklyn neighborhoods, prenatal vitamins, and New York's divorce laws. Each tab felt like a step toward a new chapter, one she'd write on her own terms. Her phone lit up one last time. Sterling again. But this time, instead of the usual anxiety, she felt something different. The first stirrings of freedom. She turned the phone face down and continued planning her future, one Google search at a time. The Brooklyn brownstone's hardwood floors creaked under Marlo's feet as she wandered through what would become her new home. February sun streamed through tall windows, casting golden rectangles across empty rooms full of possibility. At 5 months pregnant, her baby bump was now visible beneath her oversized sweater, a constant reminder of everything that had changed and everything still to come. "The previous tenants left that vintage drafting table in the spare room," her father said, following her through the space. "Thought you might want to use it for your design work." Marlo ran her fingers along the table's weathered surface. "Perfect for late-night sketching sessions when sleep proved elusive." "It's perfect, Dad." Her mother emerged from the kitchen, phone in hand. "Just got off with Diane. The divorce papers will be ready tomorrow." Eleanor's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed concern. Sterling's contesting the terms. He wants shared custody. Of a child that isn't even born yet? Marlowe's hand instinctively moved to her stomach. He gave up that right when he moved in with Reese? Eleanor finished. Yes, but legally, it's more complicated. The news had reached Marlowe 2 weeks ago. Sterling and Reese were living together in his Charleston penthouse, the same penthouse where he and Marlowe had spent their first year of marriage. The irony wasn't lost on her. A knock at the door interrupted their discussion. The moving company had arrived with her belongings, what little she'd chosen to bring from her old life. As the movers began bringing in boxes, Marlowe retreated to the bay window in what would become her bedroom, watching Brooklyn life unfold on the street below. Your mother told me about Sterling, Caleb said, joining her. We'll fight him if necessary. You know that, right? Marlowe nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Her father, always the quiet protector, the steady foundation when everything else crumbled. The afternoon passed in a blur of unpacking and organizing. By sunset, her parents reluctantly prepared to leave for their hotel. Tomorrow, they'd fly back to Charleston, leaving Marlowe truly alone for the first time since everything fell apart. Promise you'll call if you need anything, Eleanor insisted, hugging her daughter tight. Boys, and remember, your first prenatal appointment with Dr. Patel is next week. I can fly back? Mom, Marlowe interrupted gently. I'll be okay. Really. After they left, Marlowe stood in her new living room, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes in the growing darkness. The city's rhythm pulsed beyond her windows. Car horns, distant sirens, the subway rumbling beneath the streets. So different from Charleston's genteel quiet. Her phone chimed. A text from Sterling. My lawyer contacted yours. We need to discuss the baby's future. Please don't shut me out. Before she could respond, another message arrived. This one from an unknown number. You can't run forever. He'll never be just yours. R. Reese. The audacity stole Marlowe's breath. With trembling fingers, she blocked both numbers. Then, driven by a sudden surge of energy, she began unpacking with renewed purpose. Each item she placed felt like a small act of defiance. Her favorite coffee mug on the kitchen counter, her sketches pinned to the walls, her clothes hanging in the closet. This space was hers, her sanctuary, her fresh start. At the bottom of a box labeled Office, she found something unexpected. Her old sketchbook from college, filled with dreams and designs she'd set aside for Sterling's career, his ambitions, his life. She settled at the vintage drafting table, flipping through pages of forgotten possibilities. On the last blank page, she began to sketch, not client work or baby room designs, but something else. Abstract shapes that morphed into concrete forms, chaos transforming into order. She drew until her hand cramped and the city lights twinkled through her windows. A gentle flutter in her stomach made her pause. The baby, her baby, moving for the first time. Just you and me, little one, she whispered, pressing her palm against the spot. We're going to be okay. She looked around the room, at the drafting table bathed in streetlight, the skyline visible through her windows, the endless possibilities stretching before her. For the first time since November, she felt something close to peace. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and custody battles, doctor's appointments and client deadlines. But tonight, in this moment, Marlowe allowed herself to simply be, a woman rewriting her own story, one page at a time. Spring arrived in Brooklyn with a burst of cherry blossoms and unseasonably warm weather. At 7 months pregnant, Marlowe had settled into a routine that almost felt normal. Morning client calls, afternoon walks through the neighborhood, and evenings spent working on her growing freelance portfolio. Her body had changed, but so had her spirit, growing stronger with each passing day. That particular Tuesday morning found her at her favorite coffee shop, The Daily Grind, nursing a decaf vanilla iced coffee while reviewing designs for a tech startup's rebranding. The owner, an elderly woman named Rose, had taken to saving Marlowe's preferred corner table, away from the window, but close enough to people watch. Mind if I join you? Every other table's taken. Marlowe looked up to find a tall, bald man with an immaculately trimmed beard and kind brown eyes. He held a Turkish coffee in one hand and a laptop bag in the other. Something about his presence, confident yet gentle, made her hesitate only briefly before nodding. I'm Nathan, he said, settling into the chair across from her. The rich scent of his cologne, something woody and sophisticated, mingled with the coffee shop's familiar aroma. "Oh, Marlo," she replied, then quickly returned to her work, hoping to discourage conversation. She'd had enough of men and their charming smiles to last a lifetime, but Nathan seemed content with silence, focused on his own laptop. Occasionally, she caught him absently stroking his beard while staring intently at his screen, a gesture that somehow made him seem more human, less threatening. The peaceful coexistence was shattered by her phone buzzing against the table. Sterling's lawyer's number flashed on the screen. Marlo's hand trembled as she declined the call, but not before Nathan caught a glimpse of her expression. "Bad news?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. Perhaps it was pregnancy hormones, or maybe just months of holding everything in ICU. But Marlo found herself answering, "My ex-husband's lawyer. They're pushing for shared custody before the baby's even born." "Ah," Nathan said, closing his laptop. "Family law isn't my specialty, but I know something about difficult exes. My former fiancée tried to take half my tech company in the breakup, despite herself." Marlo was intrigued. "What happened?" "Turned out she was more interested in my stock options than me." He smiled ruefully. Expensive lesson in trust. Before Marlo could respond, another call came through, this time from her doctor's office. Her expression darkened as she listened to the message. "Everything okay?" Nathan asked when she hung up. "My regular appointment got canceled. They can't reschedule until next week, but I needed to discuss some concerns about—" She trailed off, suddenly aware she was oversharing with a stranger. Nathan pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table. "My sister's an OB/GYN at Mount Sinai. Best doctor in the city. Tell her I sent you. She owes me for fixing her website last month." Marlo studied the card. Dr. Layla Calloway, maternal fetal medicine specialist. Looking back at Nathan, she noticed for the first time the family resemblance he'd mentioned. Something in the shape of the eyes, the warmth of the smile. "I don't need," she started. "Charity," Nathan finished. "It's not. It's one parent-to-be helping another. I have a daughter from my previous marriage. Those prenatal appointments, they shouldn't be faced alone." Something in his tone, understanding without pity, made Marlo's carefully constructed walls waver. She slipped the card into her wallet. "Thank you," she said softly. Their conversation was interrupted by Rose bringing Nathan's lunch order. "Your usual, Mr. Calloway. And Marlo, honey, I added extra pickles to your sandwich. Growing babies need their cravings satisfied." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "The turkey club with extra pickles and no tomatoes. That's been my standing order for months. Minus the turkey, plus cucumber," Marlo corrected, a small smile tugging at her lips. The afternoon light filtered through the coffee shop's windows, casting a warm glow over their shared corner. For the first time in months, Marlo felt the weight on her shoulders lighten slightly. Not because of Nathan specifically, but because of the reminder that not every unexpected encounter had to end in betrayal. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Reese. "Sterling misses his family. The family you're taking from him." Marlo's hands clenched around her phone. Nathan noticed the change in her demeanor but didn't pry. Instead, he simply pushed the plate of cookies Rose had brought closer to her side of the table. "Sometimes," he said casually, returning to his work, "the best revenge is living well." Marlo picked up a cookie, considering his words. Living well. Maybe that's what all this was about. Not running away, not fighting back, but simply living well on her own terms. She opened her design software again, but this time with a new energy. Each stroke of her digital pen felt like another step toward that goal. Living well, growing stronger, building a life that was entirely her own. The humidity hung heavy in the June air as Marlo waddled, there was no other word for it now at 8 months pregnant, into her lawyer's Manhattan office. Dr. Layla Calloway had become not just her physician but a friend, assuring her that both she and the baby were healthy despite the stress. But today's meeting threatened to undo all that careful calm she'd built. "Sterling's filed for an emergency hearing," Diana Morrison, her lawyer, explained, sliding a document across the polished desk. "He's claiming you fled the state to deny him his parental rights." Marlo's grip tightened on the arms of her chair. "Fled? I left because he moved in with his mistress." "I know." Diana's expression was grim. "But his firm has significant influence even here in New York. They're pushing for mandatory mediation before the birth." The baby kicked sharply, as if sensing her distress. 8 months of building a new life, of finding her footing, and now Sterling was trying to drag her back into his chaos. "When?" Next week, in Charleston, the room spun slightly. Charleston, where Sterling and Reese played house in her old home, where whispers and stares would follow her every move. "I'll go with you," Diana offered. "We'll show them exactly why you left." Outside the office, the sky darkened with approaching summer storms. Marlowe's phone lit up with a text from Nathan. "Coffee shop's empty. Perfect for finishing that deadline design you mentioned." Over the past month, their chance meeting had evolved into a comfortable friendship. Nathan never pushed, never assumed, just offered quiet support and occasional dad jokes that were so bad they were actually funny. His daughter, Lily, had even started joining them sometimes, her 7-year-old chatter filling the coffee shop with light. But today, Marlowe couldn't face even that gentle companionship. "Rain check," she texted back. Our lawyer meeting ran long. 3 dots appeared immediately. "Everything okay?" Before she could respond, another message popped up. "Reese, looking forward to seeing you next week. Sterling's already baby-proofing the house." Anger surged through Marlowe, hot and fierce. She yanked her phone up to block Reese's number again, but her trembling fingers slipped on the screen, accidentally opening her photo gallery instead. There, buried among recent ultrasound pictures, was an image from last November, her and Sterling at a charity gala, his arm around her waist, both smiling. She looked happy, unknowing. She looked like a fool. Thunder cracked overhead as the first fat raindrops fell. Marlowe ducked into the nearest subway station, her mind racing. The mediation would force her to face not just Sterling, but the life she'd left behind, the friends who'd chosen sides, the social circle that had splintered, the dreams that had shattered like glass. Her phone buzzed again. "Nathan, Lily asked if you're coming to her dance recital next week. No pressure, just throwing it out there." Something inside Marlowe broke. Here was a child who'd welcomed her into their little coffee shop family without question, who drew pictures of Ms. Marlowe and baby with rainbow crayons, who represented everything pure and uncomplicated about love. "I can't," she typed back. "Have to go to Charleston. Legal stuff." The response came quickly. "Need a friend to talk to? Rose just made fresh cookies." Marlowe hesitated. Her instinct was to retreat, to handle this alone like she'd handled everything else. But as another crack of thunder shook the subway station, she thought of Dr. Layla's words at her last appointment. "Strength isn't about carrying everything alone. Sometimes it's about knowing when to let others help carry the load." "Actually," she replied to Nathan, "I could really use those cookies." 20 minutes later, she sat in their usual corner at the daily grind, the storm raging outside while she told Nathan everything. The emergency hearing, Reese's taunts, the mandatory return to Charleston. "I want some backup," he asked when she finished. "Lily's recital got postponed anyway. I could fly down, be there for moral support, no strings, no expectations, just a friend in your corner." Marlowe looked at him, this man who'd never once made her feel weak for needing help, who respected her boundaries while offering unwavering support. For the first time, she let herself really see him, the kindness in his eyes, the steady presence he offered, the way he made space for her healing without trying to fix everything. "I can't ask you to." "You didn't," he interrupted gently. "I offered." Big difference. Outside, the storm began to ease, sunlight breaking through the clouds. Marlowe felt something shift inside her, not just the baby moving, but something in her heart, a wall lowering, just slightly, a door opening, just a crack. "Okay," she said softly. "Thank you." Charleston's familiar humidity wrapped around Marlowe like an unwelcome embrace as she stepped out of the courthouse. The mediation had been exactly as brutal as she'd expected. Sterling, impeccable in his tailored suit, had played the part of the concerned father to be perfectly, while his high-powered legal team painted her as an unstable woman who'd fled with his unborn child. "You did well in there," Nathan murmured beside her, his steady presence the only thing keeping her grounded. He'd kept his promise, flying down the day before, booking a room at a different hotel from hers to avoid any appearance of impropriety that Sterling's lawyers might exploit. "Did I?" Marlowe's voice cracked. "You heard them. Emotionally unstable, vindictive, using the pregnancy as a weapon." Her hand rested on her prominent belly, the baby particularly active today, as if sensing the tension. "Miss Jennings." Marlowe froze at the familiar voice. Turning, she found herself face to face with Reese Moreland for the first time. The woman was even more striking in person, her dark hair gleaming in the Charleston sun, designer dress highlighting every curve. But it was her expression, a mixture of triumph and challenge, that made Marlowe's blood run cold. "I think we should talk," Reese said, stepping closer, woman to woman. Nathan moved slightly, positioning himself between them. "I don't think that's necessary." "And you are?" Reese's perfectly shaped eyebrow arched. "Leaving," Marlowe cut in, finding her voice. "We're leaving." But Reese wasn't finished. "Sterling's changed, you know. He's ready to be a father, to make things right. If you'd just be reasonable." Reasonable. The word exploded from Marlowe with unexpected force. Was he being reasonable when he carried on with you for months? When he lied to my face? When he moved you into our home before I'd even packed my things? The baby kicked sharply, and Marlowe winced, pressing a hand to her side. Nathan's hand immediately went to her elbow, steadying her. "You should go," he told Reese, his voice quiet but firm. "Now." Something flickered in Reese's eyes as she looked between them. "Oh, I see. Didn't take you long to replace him, did it? That's enough." The new voice belonged to Eleanor, who'd appeared from the courthouse. "My daughter doesn't owe you any explanations. Not now. Not ever." Reese opened her mouth to respond, but the arrival of Sterling and his legal team created a momentary distraction. Marlowe used the opportunity to slip away, Nathan and Eleanor flanking her protectively. They ended up at a small cafe several blocks away, one Marlowe had never visited during her life in Charleston, neutral territory. While Eleanor went to order their drinks, Nathan studied Marlowe's face with concern. "Your hands are shaking," he observed quietly. Marlowe looked down at her trembling fingers. Seeing them together, it made it real in a way it wasn't before. All those months of texts and photos, but actually seeing them. "Want to know what I saw?" Nathan's voice was gentle. "I saw two people desperately trying to convince themselves they made the right choice, and one incredibly strong woman who actually did." Tears pricked at Marlowe's eyes. "I'm not strong. I'm terrified." The mediator's recommendations: shared custody from birth, mandatory returns to Charleston every month, Sterling having a say in every major decision. "Being strong doesn't mean you're not scared," Nathan said. "It means you keep going anyway." Eleanor returned with their drinks. Chamomile tea for Marlowe, Turkish coffee for Nathan. She'd taken to mothering them both over the past 2 days, seemingly approving of the friendship that had developed between them. "The lawyers think we can contest some of the recommendations," Eleanor said, sitting down. "Especially the monthly returns. No judge will force a nursing mother to travel that frequently." Marlowe sipped her tea, letting its warmth calm her nerves. Through the cafe window, she could see the spires of St. Michael's Church, where she and Sterling had married. The sight didn't bring the usual pain, just a dull acknowledgement of something past. Whatever happens," Nathan said, "you've got people in your corner, in New York, in Charleston. You're not alone in this." The baby moved again, gentler this time. Marlowe thought about her new life in Brooklyn, her growing business, the friendship with Nathan and Lily, the peace she'd found in her brownstone. Sterling and Reese might have taken her past, but they couldn't touch her future. "No," she agreed, meeting Nathan's steady gaze. "But I'm not alone anymore." The August heat wave hit New York with brutal force, but it was nothing compared to the storm brewing in Sterling's law office. Marlowe sat rigidly in the conference room, 9 months pregnant and beyond exhausted, as her ex-husband's voice rose in frustration. "You can't seriously be considering a home birth in New York," Sterling snapped, pacing the length of the mahogany table. "Our child should be born in Charleston, in the hospital where generations of Archers—" "Our child?" Marlowe interrupted, her voice ice cold. "You mean the child you denied was yours when Reese threatened to leave you?" "Oh yes. I heard about that little argument." Sterling stopped pacing, his face draining of color. Behind him, the Manhattan skyline shimmered in the summer haze, a world away from the genteel streets of Charleston. Who told you?" "Your own father, actually." Marlowe watched the shock register on Sterling's face. "Harrison called me last week. Seems he's not too proud of how his son's been behaving." The revelation hung in the air between them. Harrison Archer, the family patriarch, reaching out to his former daughter-in-law had been unexpected. His words even more so: "You deserve better than what my son became." Diana Morrison, Marlowe's lawyer, cleared her throat. "If we could return to the matter at hand." A sharp pain cut through Marlowe's abdomen, stealing her breath. She'd been having contractions all morning but had dismissed them as Braxton Hicks. This one felt different. "Marlowe, Diana's voice seemed distant. Do you need? I'm fine, she managed. But another contraction hit, stronger this time. Her water broke with devastating clarity, spreading across the expensive office chair. Sterling's face went from angry to panicked. Someone call an ambulance. No, Marlo gasped, pulling out her phone with trembling fingers. Call Nathan. He'll take me to Dr. Calloway. Nathan? Sterling's voice cracked. You're in labor and you want that? That what? Marlo challenged, even as another contraction ripped through her. That man who's been there for every appointment, who helped paint the nursery, who makes sure I eat when I work late. That man. Diana was already dialing, while Sterling's lawyer looked increasingly uncomfortable. Through the haze of pain, Marlo saw something shift in Sterling's expression. Recognition, perhaps, of what he'd thrown away. Nathan arrived in record time, his usual calm presence a balm in the chaos. He took one look at the situation and moved to Marlo's side, helping her up with practiced ease. Your hospital bag is still in my car from yesterday's false alarm, he said softly. Layla's waiting at the hospital. Everything's ready. Sterling stepped forward. I'm coming too. That's my child. No. Marlo's voice was firm despite her pain. You'll be notified when the baby's born, as per the agreement, but you don't get to be there for this. You lost that right in November. Another contraction hit as Nathan guided her toward the elevator. She heard Sterling calling after them, heard Diana assuring him she'd keep him updated, but all she could focus on was Nathan's steady heartbeat as she leaned against him. In the car, between contractions, Marlo finally let her tears fall. I didn't want it to be like this. Any of it. Nathan navigated through Manhattan traffic with remarkable calm. I know, but you're doing great. And think about it. Your child's already showing perfect dramatic timing. Definitely takes after their mother. Despite everything, Marlo laughed, then winced as another contraction hit. Almost there, Nathan assured her. Layla's the best, and I'll be right outside if you need anything. Will you? Marlo hesitated, then pushed through her fear. Will you stay? In the room. I don't want to do this alone. Nathan's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, full of something that made her heart skip. You never have to do anything alone again. Not if you don't want to. As they pulled up to Mount Sinai, Marlo felt another shift inside her. Not just the baby preparing for arrival, but something in her soul clicking into place. She'd walked away from a life built on lies and found something real, something true. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Sterling, but also one from Lily. Good luck with the baby. Dad says I can meet my new friend tomorrow. Through the pain, Marlo smiled. Sometimes family wasn't what you were born into or married into. Sometimes it was what you built from the ashes of what burned down. Rowan Jennings came into the world at 3:47 a.m. on a warm August morning, his powerful cry echoing through the delivery room. Dr. Layla Calloway placed the squirming bundle on Marlo's chest, while Nathan, still holding her hand, watched with tears in his eyes. He's perfect, Marlo whispered, counting tiny fingers and toes. The baby had a shock of dark hair and, when he briefly opened his eyes, she caught a glimpse of what looked like her own sea-green color. Nathan squeezed her hand gently, just like his mom. The next few hours passed in a blur of nurses, checks, and quiet moments of wonder. Eleanor and Caleb arrived from Charleston, having caught the first flight out when Nathan called them. They found their daughter glowing with exhaustion and joy, their grandson sleeping peacefully in her arms. Sterling's in the waiting room, Eleanor said softly, after they'd had their time with the baby. Hospital policy says we can't keep him out. Marlo took a deep breath, looking down at Rowan's peaceful face. It's okay. He should meet his son. Nathan started to leave, but Marlo caught his hand. Stay, please. When Sterling entered, his usual confidence was nowhere to be seen. He stopped short at the sight of the tableau before him. Marlo in the hospital bed, Nathan standing protectively nearby, and the tiny bundle that changed everything. Would you like to meet your son? Marlo's voice was gentle but firm. His name is Rowan Jennings. Sterling's face twitched at the surname, but he said nothing as he approached the bed. When Marlo carefully transferred the baby to his arms, his hands trembled. He has your eyes, Sterling said quietly, studying the infant's face. For a moment, Marlo saw a flash of the man she'd once loved. Vulnerable, genuine, human. Then his phone buzzed. Reese's name flashed on the screen. The moment shattered. Sterling carefully returned Rowan to Marlo, his face closing off. I'll have my lawyer contact yours about the visitation schedule." After he left, silence filled the room until Rowan's soft whimper broke it. As Marlo adjusted her position to nurse him for the first time, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The Sterling who'd just left wasn't the man she'd married, but maybe he never had been. She'd been in love with an illusion, a carefully constructed facade that had crumbled under pressure. "You okay?" Nathan asked softly, once her parents had stepped out to get coffee. Surprisingly, yes. Marlo smiled down at her nursing son. "For the first time, I really am." A knock at the door revealed Lily, practically bouncing with excitement, followed by a slightly apologetic Layla. She couldn't wait any longer to meet her new friend, Layla explained with a grin. Lily approached the bed carefully, her eyes wide with wonder. "He's so tiny." "Was I that tiny, Dad?" "Even smaller," Nathan chuckled, lifting her up for a better view. Watching them, Marlo felt tears spring to her eyes, happy ones this time. This was what family could be, not a prison of expectations and appearances, but a safe harbor of acceptance and love. Later that evening, as the city lights twinkled through her private room window, Marlo scrolled through the photos on her phone. Pictures of Rowan with his grandparents, with Lily making funny faces at him, with Nathan holding him so carefully while Marlo rested. A text from Reese appeared. "Sterling's devastated you used your maiden name for the baby. This isn't over." But for once, the message didn't sting. Marlo looked at her son, sleeping peacefully in his hospital bassinet, then at Nathan, who'd fallen asleep in the chair beside her bed, still refusing to leave them alone in the hospital. She deleted the message without responding. Let Sterling and Reese play their games. She had everything she needed right here. Her son, her strength, and a man who'd shown her what real support looked like. "Sweet dreams, little one," she whispered to Rowan. "Welcome to our perfectly imperfect family." November in Brooklyn painted the streets with golden leaves, a stark contrast to the gray morning 1 year ago when Marlo's world had shattered. Now standing in her brownstone's living room, surrounded by birthday decorations for Rowan's 3-month celebration, she could hardly believe how much had changed. "The cake's here," Lily announced, rushing in from the kitchen where Nathan was arranging food. At 7, she'd appointed herself Rowan's official big sister, a role she took very seriously, and Dad didn't even drop it this time. "That was one time," Nathan called out, following her with a grin. He stopped beside Marlo, sliding an arm around her waist with the easy familiarity they'd developed. "And if I remember correctly, someone bumped into me while chasing a butterfly." The doorbell rang, Eleanor and Caleb, arriving early to help with final preparations. They'd moved to New York 2 months ago. Unable to bear being far from their grandson, Harrison Archer had helped them find a place in the city, another unexpected ally in their corner. "Where's my favorite grandson?" Eleanor cooed, scooping Rowan from his playmat. The baby gurgled happily, reaching for her necklace with chubby fingers. "Sterling called," Caleb said quietly to Marlo. "He won't be coming today. Something about a major case." Marlo nodded, unsurprised. Since Rowan's birth, Sterling's involvement had been minimal, supervised visits that grew increasingly sporadic. Last week, his lawyer had contacted Diana about modifying the custody agreement, reducing his visitation rights in exchange for financial support. "It's better this way," she said, watching Rowan laugh at Lily's peekaboo game. "He needs consistency, not obligation." The afternoon filled their home with laughter and love. Dr. Layla arrived with her wife, both bearing more gifts for their already spoiled nephew. Rose from the coffee shop brought her famous cookies and happy tears. Having watched this unusual family come together over countless cups of coffee, Nathan found Marlo in the kitchen later, taking a quiet moment while the party continued in the living room. "Penny, for your thoughts. Just thinking about last November," she said, leaning into him. "How lost I felt, how impossible this happiness seemed. And now I know that sometimes things have to break completely before they can be rebuilt into something better." She turned to face him, taking in the face that had become her home. "Thank you for being there while I put the pieces back together." "Thank you for letting me," he replied softly, before Lily's voice interrupted them. "Dad, Mom." Rowan's trying to eat the wrapping paper. They both froze at Lily's words. It was the first time she'd called Marlo Mom. Their eyes met, sharing a moment of profound understanding before rushing to rescue Rowan from his paper feast. Later that night, After the guests had left and the children were asleep, Marlo sat at her drafting table. The old sketchbook lay open before her, its pages now filled with new designs, new dreams. On the last page, she'd started a different kind of drawing, a family portrait. Not the perfect, polished family she'd once thought she needed, but the beautiful, messy, real one she'd found instead. Her phone lit up with a text from Reese. Sterling signed the papers. You won. Marlo looked at the message, then at the framed photo on her desk. Rowan in Nathan's arms, Lily making him laugh, all of them together at the park last weekend. She didn't need to respond to Reese. There was nothing left to say. This wasn't about winning or losing. It was about finding the strength to let go of a life that was wrong for her, and the courage to embrace one that was right. She closed her sketchbook and walked to the nursery, where Nathan was already putting away the last of Rowan's new toys. Their eyes met in the soft glow of the night light, and Marlo felt that familiar warmth in her chest, not the desperate, consuming love she'd had with Sterling, but something steadier, truer. Ready for bed? Nathan asked, holding out his hand. Marlo took it, intertwining their fingers. Ready for everything. Outside, the November wind rustled through Brooklyn's trees, but this time it didn't carry warnings or regrets. Instead, it whispered of new beginnings, of love rebuilt from shattered pieces, of a future brighter than any she could have imagined in those dark days a year ago. She'd learned that sometimes the best views come after the hardest climbs, that family isn't always blood, and that true love doesn't demand perfection. It offers acceptance, support, and the freedom to grow. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Rowan's soft breathing through the baby monitor and Nathan's steady heartbeat beneath her cheek, Marlo smiled. She was no longer the woman who'd taken that pregnancy test in Charleston a year ago. She was stronger now, wiser, and finally, completely herself. November had come full circle, but this time, instead of endings, it brought beginnings, and she was ready for every single one. 3 years later, the Brooklyn Brownstones' kitchen was alive with chaos on a crisp spring morning. Rowan, now a spirited 3-year-old with his mother's sea-green eyes and untamable dark curls, sat at the counter carefully, helping Nathan make pancakes. More batter seemed to be on his face than in the bowl. Careful, little man. Nathan laughed, wiping flour from his son's nose. Remember what happened last time? I made it snow in the kitchen, Rowan declared proudly, making Lily, now 10, and fully embracing her role as big sister, roll her eyes affectionately from her spot at the table where she was finishing homework. Marlo watched from the doorway, one hand resting on her slightly swollen belly, another surprise this spring had brought. Her design firm had just won a major contract. Her latest collection of digital art was featured in a Soho gallery, and the novel she'd written about her journey had found a publisher. But these professional achievements paled in comparison to the joy she found in these simple morning moments. The last time Sterling had visited, 6 months ago, he'd barely recognized their son. His life with Reese had imploded spectacularly. She'd left him for a rising politician, a scandal that had cost him his partnership at the firm. He'd moved to California shortly after Rowney, his monthly support checks continuing but his presence in Rowan's life fading to holiday cards and occasional video calls. At first, it had hurt Marlo to see her son's biological father become a stranger, but then she'd watch Nathan spending hours building blanket forts with Rowan, teaching him to pray in Turkish, comforting him after nightmares, and she'd understand that fatherhood had nothing to do with DNA. Mom, Lily's voice pulled her from her thoughts. Did you tell Dad about the baby's name yet? Nathan looked up, curiosity bright in his eyes. They'd agreed to wait until birth to learn the gender, but Marlo had been keeping the name choices close to her heart. If it's a girl, she said, joining her family at the counter. I was thinking Rose. She smiled at the memory of the coffee shop owner, who'd unknowingly helped create this family. And if it's a boy, Harrison, a tribute to the man who'd shown her that people could surprise you in the best ways. Nathan's eyes softened with understanding. He pulled her close, dropping a kiss on her flour-dusted hair. Perfect. Can we go visit Aunt Layla today? Rowan asked, somehow managing to get batter in his hair. She promised to show me the baby pictures in Mommy's belly. After we clean up this kitchen hurricane, Marlo laughed. And maybe after someone takes a bath. As she helped Nathan and the kids restore order to the kitchen, Marlo caught sight of their reflection in the window. All 4 of them, laughing, messy, perfectly imperfect. On her finger, her new wedding ring caught the morning light. She and Nathan had married in a small ceremony in the coffee shop where they'd met, Rose officiating, Lily as their flower girl, and Rowan toddling down the aisle with the rings. Life wasn't the carefully choreographed dance she'd once thought it should be. It was wild and unpredictable, full of broken pieces that could become beautiful mosaics if you were brave enough to rebuild. Her phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor about tonight's family dinner. Below it was an old message she'd kept from Reese. You'll never have the perfect family you wanted. Reese had been right, in a way. Marlo didn't have the perfect family she'd wanted. She had something better, the real family she needed, and it was more beautiful than anything she could have planned. The end. If you discovered a betrayal while pregnant, like Marlo, would you have the strength to start again from scratch in a new city, knowing that your ex-partner would fight for custody of the baby? At what point do you think Marlo showed the most strength? When she decided to leave Charleston pregnant? When she confronted Sterling and Reese personally? Or when she allowed herself to open her heart to Nathan, even with all the traumas of the past? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please leave a like to help me out, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next stories. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.